What happens when survival is guaranteed, but meaning is not? Universal basic income is often described as freedom. Freedom from fear. Freedom from survival pressure. Freedom to choose. That is the hopeful version. But every system that removes one pressure creates another. Imagine two people receiving the same guaranteed income. One already owns a home. The other rents in a city where housing is scarce. The payment is equal. The outcome is not. That is the tension at the heart of UBI. It can reduce insecurity, but it cannot erase inequality. It can create breathing room, but it cannot guarantee purpose, and it cannot stop power from concentrating somewhere else. There is no perfect system, only trade-offs, and UBI is no exception. A flat payment sounds fair. Everyone gets the same amount, the same baseline, the same safety net. But equality and fairness are not identical. People begin from different places, different wealth, different debts, different costs, different opportunities. A guaranteed income lands differently depending on what already surrounds it. For someone with savings, it may create room to invest, retrain, or take risks. For someone already trapped by high rent, debt, or unstable costs, it may simply disappear into existing pressure. UBI can stop people falling, but that does not mean it helps everyone rise. That matters because the language of equality can hide the reality of unequal starting points. A flat payment does not flatten society. It sits on top of everything that already exists. UBI promises sufficiency. Enough to live, enough to breathe, enough to choose differently. But human beings rarely stop at enough. Needs expand, expectations rise. What begins as relief becomes normality, then necessity, then entitlement. This is not a moral failure. It is part of human nature. People compare, they adjust, they notice what others have, they reset their own idea of what counts as acceptable. That is why the problem of UBI is not only money, it is psychology. The question is not whether a baseline helps. It can. The question is what happens after the baseline becomes ordinary. Because once enough becomes the new minimum, pressure returns in another form. UBI does not enter an empty world. It enters housing markets, energy markets, food systems, transport systems, and markets react. One of the biggest concerns around UBI is inflation, not because all prices rise equally, but because some sectors are already constrained. Housing is the clearest example. If supply is tight and demand rises, prices can move upward fast. That means part of the benefit may be absorbed before it changes anyone's real freedom. In the worst case, UBI becomes a transfer that stabilizes consumers while quietly rewarding asset owners. And in that case, it would stop offering liberation and instead become a subsidy. This does not mean inflation makes UBI impossible. It means UBI cannot be judged in isolation. A payment alone cannot solve structural shortages. And if those shortages remain, the system bends around them. That is why the argument for UBI is never just about income. It is also about the environment that income enters. Even if survival becomes more equal, status does not. Hierarchy has a way of returning. If basic income reduces one visible gap, other gaps become more important. Ownership, attention, influence, reputation, lifestyle. Humans do not only seek security, they seek standing. That is why societies can become more equal on paper while remaining deeply unequal in feeling. UBI may reduce desperation. It does not remove comparison. And if comparison survives, hierarchy survives too. This is one of the hardest truths in the entire debate. Many systems promise to soften inequality. Very few change the human instinct to sort, rank, and compare. UBI may reshape hierarchy. It will not erase it. Work has never been only about money. It structures time, creates routine, signals contribution, gives people a role. That is why the UBI debate goes deeper than economics. When survival is no longer tied directly to labor, one question becomes unavoidable. What gives life structure now? For some people, the answer will be obvious: care, creativity, learning, community, building something meaningful. For others, the answer will not come so easily. Freedom is not always experienced as liberation. Sometimes it arrives as uncertainty. A world with less survival pressure may produce more flourishing, but it may also expose how many people were relying on work, not just for income, but for identity. Security can remove fear. It cannot automatically create purpose. And if purpose weakens, social cohesion may weaken with it. UBI also raises a harder political question. Who controls the system? If a guaranteed income becomes central to daily life, then the institutions distributing it become more important than ever. That can be stabilizing or dangerous. A society that depends on guaranteed payments is also vulnerable to conditions, suspensions, policy changes, and shifts in power. This is where fears about control begin to emerge. UBI can empower people by reducing desperation, but it can also create dependence on whatever structure delivers the payment. That means governance matters as much as generosity. The design of the system matters. Its accountability matters. Its limits matter. Because a stable population is not the same as an empowered one, and a payment that reduces anxiety is not automatically a payment that increases freedom. The future UBI debate will almost certainly be shaped by automation. If AI produces more value with less human labor, then societies will face a basic question. Who owns that value? If a small number of firms or systems control most productive capacity, then UBI may become a way to redistribute some of the proceeds without redistributing much of the power. That is the deeper concern. Does UBI create a fairer society or a more manageable one? The answer depends on culture as much as policy. How societies define contribution, how they teach meaning, how they value care, effort, and responsibility, how they prevent security from becoming passivity. At its best, UBI could reduce fear and expand human possibility. At its worst, it could soften instability while leaving the deeper structure untouched. That is the real trade-off. Not salvation or catastrophe. Not utopia or collapse. Just a tool with consequences. And tools always reflect the values of the people using them. Universal basic income is neither a perfect answer nor a perfect threat. It can reduce insecurity, but it cannot eliminate inequality. It can create space, but it cannot guarantee purpose. It can stabilize society, but it can also leave power exactly where it was. That is why the real question is not whether UBI sounds compassionate. It is whether a society is prepared to think seriously about what comes after survival. Because once fear is no longer the central organizing force, something else must take its place. And that something else will determine whether UBI becomes a foundation for flourishing, or simply a softer version of the same old hierarchy. Join us every Sunday for deeper stories, bigger questions, and long-form explorations that go beyond the short videos. Because knowledge doesn't stop at 60 seconds.
Thanks for watching. This is 60-second knowledge now extended. Because curiosity doesn't stop at 60 seconds. Subscribe on YouTube and follow us on TikTok.